Okay, Thavash, Govender is here from Microsoft, and he's here specifically to talk about trade finance without boundaries, and he's going to be covering some aspects around AI, and he says that he has too much energy sometimes, so I'm looking forward to his presentation. So please welcome Thavash onto the stage. Thank you.
Where's the clicker? Cool, okay, so can you guys hear me? Loud and clear. Excellent. So, first question. What's this Microsoft bozo doing at a blockchain conference, right? Well, I'm going to show you. That's quite a mouthful of a title. What I'm going to do is break that into 3 areas. Trade finance, what's going on in Africa, how blockchain is probably critical to get this right on our continent. Then, what's happening from a tech perspective? What are we doing around consortium chains? And can I be honest with you, I still think people confuse consortium chain technology with public chains. We are focusing on both. We're trying to integrate into public chains. We're trying to build up the consortium chain technology. We'll cover that. And then AI. Talk about why AI is critical for blockchain. So what you see here are some typical supply chains and value chains. And if you've ever been in any blockchain presentation over the last few years, you would have heard of why blockchain is important and critical. Supply chain trade finance is where we really see potential. Lots of guys are taking pictures. I think the organizers will make sure that you get these slides, right? There's a few slides I've marked NDA, just don't share them. So what you normally have in a trade finance scenario are multiple actors, and in the most simple example, I am buying, or let's say I'm an SME. I am taking a loan out from you, and there would typically be at maybe 4 actors: me, my bank, you, your bank. If you are not a bank, if you're an intermediary or a loan institution. Now we want to do this across borders, so there are standards. The continent is a big place. I may not know of you as an organization, if you're creditworthy, or even if I want to work with your bank, and it might take many months and lots of paperwork to get this process going. We can't afford that. We want speed of business in Africa. We need speed of business in Africa, okay? And blockchain has many opportunities for that. Now, what's happening in Africa at the moment, some of you may not be aware, and these are actual clippings that I got from the business day last week in prepping for this session. There's something called ACFTA. Doesn't exactly roll off the tongue. African Continental Free Trade Agreement, right? Fraught with hurdles. I think the first hurdle is the name. We need to find a catchier. NAFTA was great, but then I think the Americans changed that, right? But it's very interesting. Go and do some research in this. The first phase of this is supposed to come online or be implemented July 1st or June 1st, this year. In just a few months, we could have a free trade zone across Africa. The one article there talks about some of those hurdles. Trust, right? Apparently, South Africa and Nigeria in particular had massive disagreements around what we're going to do in terms of opening our not borders, but economic zones. And I'm not here to debate about free trade. That's a topic in itself. Trust. Does blockchain help with trust? Or can blockchain help with trust? You know the answer already if you're sitting here. The second article talks, amongst other things, about liquidity. Right? What's liquidity? Settlement, tokens, if you want, a lot of stuff that we can do, typically on public chains. So there needs to be a mechanism for enterprise and consortium chains to settle, and I'll talk about the technology in a minute. So that's where it's getting very interesting. So let's talk about why blockchain can assist or be very useful. Some people don't call it blockchain, by the way. They call it DLT, distributed ledger technology. How many of you have heard of this term? Nobody? Okay, you guys are too quiet as an audience. I get suspicious of very quiet audiences because it means that you're thinking of something and, that's fine. DLT, I don't know, I think guys maybe feel that blockchain is a subset of DLT. Traceability, track assets, the classic supply chain use case, from farm to boxed product on a supermarket shelf. Great. Transparency, reduce delays in process. So while we're making the process more trustable, we're fixing that problem. If I don't have to go and research you, because you're in Kenya and I'm in South Africa, I've never heard of you before, but we're all part of this blockchain consortium for trade finance. There are networks that have been created. Go and research the Marco Polo network. Maybe write that down if you haven't heard about that already. I know you're part of the same consortium, so there's an element of trust, so we can go further ahead with our business process. Auditability, everything's logged. But that data sitting on the blockchain has more inherent value if you bring analytics to it, right? Efficiency, no intermediaries. Auto triggers. Where would auto triggers come from? Smart contracts, right? Heard of that? And security, immutability, the immutability aspect, which varies according to the consortium chain technology that you choose, okay? So great. A bit of a guideline slide. So use trade finance, use blockchain for trade finance when the following are true. A process crosses trust boundaries, as business processes do, increasingly in the world of globalization and free trade. Multiple parties work off the same data or need to share data. You could put data on a public chain like Ethereum, or you're going to build a consortium chain because you don't want the data to be public. With Microsoft, you could build Ethereum technology on Azure to extend the Ethereum ecosystem. Okay, that's what we do. We do Hyperledger and a whole bunch of ledgers as well. So we're not locking, we're focusing on a few ledger technologies, right? Preventing intermediaries from controlling the single source of truth. That's why you wouldn't want a database. Now, I've been a database guy for almost 20 years, and there seems to be this big debate between user database and user blockchain. And they're not mutually exclusive in the sense that they don't always compete. And especially replacing a process that involves low-value manual verification steps. That's where it makes the most amount of sense for enterprise usage of blockchain. Okay, everybody with me. Let's look at some scenarios. Where have we actually done this? We've actually done this in Africa. So Interswitch is a Nigerian company. And what I've just described, we've built. They partnered with Microsoft last year. And this is a consortium chain technology using, I'm going to just check on the ledger. I'm not sure if it's on the next slide. Could be Ethereum technology running on Azure, multiple actors. And the problem there, supply chain financing involves multiple counterparties. We don't know each other. We don't trust each other. And there's risk. There's lots of built-in risk. And what they've built is exactly what I described, and this is probably better, a diagram. Typically, to move from step 1 to step 2 in this process can take a long time, okay? Just getting a bank guarantee. But if your bank guarantees an asset tokenized on the blockchain, fine, it's there, we trust it because we're part of the consortium, let's move. And this is just a typical value chain or sequence of steps, okay? So that's great, right? There's a few other, I think the Musk case study has been floating around for a few years, so we won't get into that. There's another one that we did internally. Anyone heard of Xbox, right? Yes, okay. Just checking. Very quiet audience, I've got to ask. So we're now doing things like we basically created like a Netflix for Xbox, Netflix for games, called Game Pass, where you subscribe and you have, you pay a monthly fee and you have access to unlimited games. And we've got to obviously pay those companies putting their games there. And there's royalty payments, and we track usage, which are the most popular games. And we needed trust. So we needed this for ourselves. We needed trust. You've got, let's say, 50 game publishers and game development companies. So we created a blockchain where they're members of the consortium, okay? But we don't want this info to be public, so we're not going to put this on public Ethereum. We don't want people to know that Activision did this and the financial figures involved. So we created a consortium chain using our Azure blockchain technology really mature. I mean, we were one of the two companies that got into blockchain right at the beginning, the other one being IBM, and they did a lot of work on Hyperledger. We're seeing Hyperledger deployed onto the Azure cloud now, these types of solutions. So that's the use case. Let's go into the technology, part 2, right? I see some people smiling, so I guess some of these slides are resonating, right? Or you're smiling for something else. Azure Blockchain Service. This is now our latest form of what we've created. Spin up an entire consortium chain, X number of nodes, X number of actors, use enterprise technology. So you've got security. You can use AD to authenticate if everybody's on the back end using Active Directory, right? It's familiar. Speed of solution is great. And I'm going to talk about this in particular at the end. We can integrate between the blockchain, which the consortium sees, and then push down data and assets to your back-end system, which only you see as one member of that consortium. Very powerful. And it's needed. This was needed. So this doesn't compete with public chains. That's a different use case. That's the full decentralized, nobody owns it. I write a piece of code, and it can run forever autonomously, deployed to the Ethereum mainnet. This is a totally different use case of using blockchain technology. Data Manager facilitates the information exchange. So I don't have the time to go into each one of these is a significant topic in itself. Blockchain tokens is something we launched only a few months ago, allows you to tokenize assets on the consortium chain, okay? Even assign value to these assets. And on consortium chain technology, you have means of finalization and paying out and that type of thing, right? The development story is fantastic. So this is how it looks. So you have a portal where, now this stage I must apologize, right? I wanted to do live demos. I'm a Microsoft guy. I love doing live demos, right? You smiling because you think that the demos always crash. I've never had a demo crash that I know of, okay? Meaning, I don't know how it looked to the audience. But the problem is, we had a particular problem. We didn't have a long enough HDMI cable from there all the way to put my laptop here. So we got a very good bunch of AV guys at the back, and they've allowed me to quickly, over lunch, just put the slides in to show you. So this is how the portal looks. You spin it up as your blockchain. You choose the ledger of your choice. You can use Quorum, Ethereum. You can use Hyperledger. Very rich developer ecosystem. And you can monitor all kinds of stats, add consortium members. We haven't forgotten about the developers. So let me show you a cool slide, right? Coming next. Who's that guy? Mark Rusinovich. Oh, you're talking about the other guy. No, that's Vitalik. Everybody knows Vitalik. I'm not going to ask you who's Vitalik. I've met Mark Rusinovich. So Mark Rusinovich, if you are familiar with the Microsoft ecosystem, he's the CTO of Azure. Right? Very knowledgeable guy. I took a picture of Mark once, and I look like a midget next to him, literally. That's how tall he is, right? He's like 7 foot or something. So Vitalik, because of the work we're doing, attended Microsoft Build last year. And the reason he's wearing that shirt is because he lost a bet. Now, I can't tell you what the bet was, but you can go and search for it on the internet, right? So Vitalik lost a bet to Mark Rusinovich. He had to wear the shirt Build, but it actually says Biddle, like hodl, Biddle on Azure. That's what the shirt says. But you know what? He was happy to wear the shirt because of what we're doing to support his Ethereum ecosystem, which is this. Heard of Visual Studio? Anyone? What's Visual Studio? Where's my hat, guys? I want to give gifts off because when I see guys smiling, it's like it's shining in my face. That's the smile. I just want to give. Do we have the caps? No. Okay. I was trying to organize like giveaways for you guys. You can integrate into Visual Studio. By the way, Visual Studio Code is totally free. Ethereum Dev Kit. You can write a smart contract in Visual Studio and not just deploy to an Azure consortium chain that you're building for enterprise businesses. You can even deploy to the Ethereum mainnet. But with a rich enterprise ecosystem, source control, all of those things. heard of GitHub, right? We work very well with GitHub. You can even do the other way around. This was a demo that I was going to do for you now. Who's heard of Remix? Any smart contract developers? Well, obviously you guys. I don't think you browse Remix. You obviously write stuff in Remix, right? I browse Remix, okay? Here's a very simple smart contract that I've got there. So how do you do this? So you use something called MetaMask. MetaMask, you guys know MetaMask, right? You will see my MetaMask wallet has 0 Ethereum in it. Hint, hint. You know, there's a QR code there. But at the top, that next to the fox face, you'll see it says HTTP Thavash, that's me, .blockchain.azure. So you can point MetaMask to your Azure Ethereum consortium chain. Then you go to Remix. Then you write your smart contract. Then you click, on environment, you don't click on Java VM. You click inject. It'll pick up the Remix extension. I'm using Firefox here. That modal window pops up, and I can deploy to my consortium chain. Very cool, very easy. And when I'm deploying to the consortium chain, I don't need to worry about gas and fees and what the cost is going to be, okay? So you guys should play with this. It's very cool. We're really focusing on the ecosystem. And then when you get to the monitoring, this is the enterprise things. I made a joke, and it was a bad joke, like most of my jokes. And I said, if you deploy to the Ethereum mainnet and you're a company, we're in Investex building, speak to the Investec guys. You can't deploy anything if you don't have HA, DR, and SLA in place. Book this big with phone numbers. Who do I call? So if your public smart contract goes down, who are you going to call? Vitalik? That was a bad joke, right? Decentralized doesn't work like that. You own the responsibility on decentralized. But with this, it's all Azure support. It's familiar. It's what your enterprise solutions look like today. And it needed to be done, guys. So you can see that's like when I hit that smart contract, how many requests per second. You can monitor all that using Azure monitoring. So it's great. So that's the technology. So I spoke about some of the problems, then the technology to solve those problems. Now I'm coming back to the business area just for a minute or so, and then I'll talk about AI at the end. So trade finance challenges. So typically, as I said, I've taken now from the first diagram 3 of these. Okay? These are what we see as the biggest use cases and where we've actually deployed production solutions. Food safety, any type of supply chain, and trade finance. And I said that trade finance, especially with free trade coming around the corner in Africa, it's going to be more focused on that. And I think there's a big opportunity for blockchain solutions and analytics on top of that in this space. Okay? Now, this is an interesting slide, the most interesting slide. Because on the left is how you typically operate with blockchain. Transactional. All we're doing is recording the transaction. The transaction can be anything, right? Identities, execution with replay. I can just replay and I can say, okay, here's a bunch of millies that was grown on this farm. We logged it on the chain, smart contract kicked off, blah, 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 truck was on strike, truck was on fire, it's South Africa, we log that on the chain, we move on. Eventually it gets to Pick and Pay in a slightly burnt box. Right? Now I was doing a conference, this is the second conference of the day, right? Life's busy when you work for Microsoft. And I was talking to a guy called Donald Farmer, who's very well known in the data space. So we kicked off that conference, and he was telling me, he used to work for Microsoft, not anymore. He was telling me that, you know what, people still don't get. There's this meme that data is the new oil. You've heard about this. All data is valuable. That's why we got data lakes now. We want to store as much data as possible. Now we're going to store data on the blockchain. But if the data is just sitting there, it's got 0 value. It's only got value to you if you have a mechanism of analyzing it properly, pulling it into some sort of analytical space, actually running machine learning algorithms on that data. So we want to use blockchain, and we don't have to wait until blockchain is so popular. We need to start thinking about this now, which is why we're doing the following. So analytical aggregation, quality evaluation. It's not just about the transaction being logged on the blockchain, especially in a trade finance scenario. Donald also said to me something. There was a survey done in the US. He lives in Seattle, where they said that compared to a brick and mortar bookstore, an online bookstore has up to 50 times more information about you. Think about a physical bookstore. I walk in, I pay cash, I buy, whatever, right? The rich dad, poor dad, right? Seeing as most of you guys sitting here are investors, I think. So when I go to a bookstore, an online bookstore, they can look at the cookies. They know where I've been. They can look at my history. I log in with the username. They're doing cross-checks. They're using AI to search absolutely everything about me, while I'm there deciding whether to buy Rich Dad, Poor Dad or the latest Harry Potter book. So what do they do with that data? Well, the really good companies analyze it. So imagine we get to a state like this, right? Where on the exchange, on the transactional side, we got an immutable transaction, and we can look at the workflows, peak transactions, length, volume, blah, blah, blah. That's being done today. But imagine if we can share this analytical data, run machine learning in real time on my blockchain data. So I need to hurry up. I don't have a lot of time. I'd like to talk for 30 minutes on this, right? These are the sharing patterns. So what you need for that is a mechanism to extract that data. These are the collaborative scenarios. I'll talk about how in a minute. You really want to use the AI piece for the two in the middle, recommendations and feedback. Feedback engines, building up in an e-commerce situation, really cross-sell, upsell. In a trade finance situation, feedback could just be, this guy's bad. We don't want to work with this guy. Or recommendations. We know this guy's also in the market, or we could help this individual or this organization somewhere in Africa in this way. There's a non-profit, or there's some other work that they do. And yes, there's a privacy aspect to that, but that's always going to be there. So today, how data is shared between organizations is that the data is in my database, and if I've got an agreement to share with you, I do it manually, or I might expose an API coming into my back-end systems, okay? But we've created something called Data Collaborative, where we enable trust between organizations and parties to share. This is not specific to blockchain, but a big part of this will be used for consortium blockchain solutions, okay? And it's really straightforward to use, and you can see in your blockchain piece there, you can just right-click, create a data share collaborative, expose APIs, there's certain information, and we can do permissions as well. The consortium members, part of the blockchain consortium, can have many degrees of trust, many levels of trust, from full trust to read-only trust. I can't write or even interact with the smart contract, okay? And this is just wrapping up what we will do for collaborative services. Now, what we've done is, I've got 2 minutes left. This is not a blockchain case study, but to show you the power of data collaboration, especially in a scenario where we're doing good for the world. Cardiac disease is a leading cause of mortality in many countries, and India being one of them. So we went to Apollo hospitals. They run clinics around the major cities, it's a chain of hospitals, and they've got a lot of data, and we said, you know what, if you share the data, let's just tick the privacy boxes, get permission. We'll use machine learning. And we built it up to a state where we could predict heart attacks for their patients. And we integrate into IoT, Apple Watch sensor data, all of those things. And if we apply this thinking to blockchain, consortium chains, really mine the data on that chain, you increase the value of that blockchain. If you're just going to use it, let's just automate this process. And let's just track the transactions. You're not getting the best value. So blockchain will have AI on top of it. It's a given. That's I should have said it at the beginning and saved 25 minutes, right? Okay, so if you, in the rare instance, enjoyed my ramblings, ping me on LinkedIn. I want to create a community. Happy to answer questions. I think since I don't have the gifts, let's just take 1 or 2 questions. We've got just over a minute. No questions, lots of pics. Okay, cool. Should I smile? Okay, cool, guys. Listen, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope I've shown you a few things that maybe you haven't seen before, and hope to hear from you guys very soon.
Thank you, Thavash. Thank you very much. Please, a round of applause.